Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here's a quote that I picked right for this episode. All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Arthur Schopenhauer. Today, we are bringing back Christine Beckwith, founder of 2020 Vision for Success Coaching, author of Finding Honor. This is chapter 5 we're talking about today. And I can't think of a better quote for this chapter and really a theme. And one of the themes in this book, all truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Christine, thank you for coming back. And I want to know, if you think about chapter 5, you think about the book. The chapter 5 is called
Hardwired to Sin.
Thanks for helping me out there. Wow. What comes to mind when you hear, first of all, that quote, right? Because all the your career, your building of 2020 Vision for Success Coaching, right? Ridicule, violently opposed, and being accepted as self-evident. What comes to mind?
That should be like etched in my gravestone, probably. Before I wrote this book, I was brutally honest with my opinion. After going through self development and writing this book, I'm honest with myself. And the funny thing about turning that quote on its head is you go through the same stages internally in your own reflection, if you can follow me this deeply, with getting honest with yourself. You do get angry in the process of owning your own truth. I think about gay people, which is an interesting example that I'll use, but I have this embedded story within the story of my life where I am introduced to these 5 boys from this other family through my parents' friendships, a poor family, a mill family, because where we grew up, everyone knows is a wealthy area, and on the outskirts of town, the mill workers, which was the center of our ecosystem where we lived, and my parents worked at the mill. Long story short, the oldest of the 5 boys and I were the same age, and we grew up together our whole lives. And they could not have had a more heterosexual boot camp than where they lived, because they lived on a farm milking cows and chickens, and they didn't have running water or electricity ever. Through high school graduation, they didn't. So even though that was into the 80s, their home never evolved to that type of luxury, which is kind of probably hard for people to wrap their head around. And I know this because I took a water-drawn bath and was driven to the neighbor's house to blow dry my hair to go to the prom with Charlie, the oldest boy. And true story, he that night was double dating with another guy, and I realized that night he was gay. And I say this because he could not come to his truth, because he was environmentally surrounded by people that were not open to it. And he had 2 brothers that were Green Berets and would become Green Berets. I mean, he grew up in a tough environment. Anyways, he would go to college, he would come out, he would get a lover. He caught AIDS during the AIDS epidemic. He died, suffered many years. I established a scholarship in his memory, which I gave away for 20 years. He was recognized by the White House. He has a plaque at BC College in his memory, thanks to our efforts. And I was a party to watching his family come to terms with all of it, because they learned of his demise at the same time of learning about him being gay. And so it's an example I draw upon about honesty. He was dying inside his secret. slowly but surely already. And he lived like this really lonely existence, but he had this beautiful soul, and he was an artist, and that's how we raised money to fund 20 years of secondary education scholarships. My point being, like, I watched his family go through the angry stage. I watched him get angry with who he was. I watched him eventually get to the peaceful place he was too, right before he died. He accepted his plight more than I did. And so, listen, this whole chapter is about how we are wired as human beings, how we are moths to the flames. Part of it is aging. As we get older, we get wiser. What does that really mean? I mean, everybody, Jason Frazier loves to talk about how he hates mortgage people saying, I've been in the business 30 years. And I said, dude, when you're in the business 30 years, come back and tell me how you feel about saying that. Because our elders tell those stories because you do earn life stripes on your invisible cloak, from survival. And there is a thing about that. There is a feeling about that. And we learn from our mistakes, and we are here to teach other people. There's a reason we should sit with our elders. There's a reason we should, listen. So this chapter is about me saying, I understand now. I was reading Genesis 23:16 in the Bible the other day. And the lesson is that when Abraham went to God and he, not to get too religious, but I think it's a great lesson. So I'm not promoting religion. I hope I'm not off-putting to the audience when I say this, but the lesson in that great book is that if you sin by innocence, God will forgive you if you ask him to, meaning we do bad things unknowingly, naturally, innately. In that example, he had invited another man's wife, Sarah, in the Bible, and it was a sin. And Sarah's husband was preparing to kill Abraham. And then Abraham confessed to God that he didn't know that Sarah was this man's wife. He thought that it was one of his friend's sisters. And God said, I believe you and I'll forgive you. And he spared him in the Bible. And I'm journaling as I read, and I'm reading a little bit at a time because I'm a deep thinker. So reading the Bible is like, I can get a page in at a time, and I have to stop and think about what the lessons are. I'm doing it because it's my sister's Bible, and because a pastor sat with her before she died with this inscribed Bible that she has. And I just need to increase my belief system around the afterlife. So I'm on a journey right now to educate myself. I'm down a rabbit hole right now.
Well,
What I'm going to
what's
say
the
to you,
value in that?
yeah,
Or finish with your thoughts. I don't want to interrupt you. This is where we are.
I think the value in that is that I wrote this book before I read the Bible, obviously. And naturally, I have believed that we all are walking towards our ultimate life's lessons in salvation. Why did I write Finding Honor, The Journey to the Truth? Honestly, because I think I had been standing on some mountaintop my whole life, believing that my trophy case represented my goodness, or represented my success, or my wallet represented my success. And when you came along and my counsel went past, when it went past everything I learned as a grown-up from my employer, because that's where I spent most of my time. So when your counsel goes past the paid for, universe you live in, I mean, it was easy for me every single day. I'm a good student. Like if I went to work every day and they told me to dig 3 ditches, I dug 4. And I found through loyalty after decades of serving that they would use me to dig 6, 7, 8, or 9. And if they thought I wouldn't take compensation, they would take that money and pay it to another man that wouldn't dig 1 without the money. And those were hard lessons for me, because I learned about myself. I learned I'm a great worker. I learned to have an awesome work ethic. I learned that by example, people would be attracted to me. Even though today I have not served within my last organization for 5 years, I still receive leadership phone calls. I recognize them wholly now as empathetic needs, people that are leaving my prior company and need to talk to me about it because they feel they're missing something from their current leaders of like a level of service. So going back to your original question, when I found myself down a road where I'd written books and served and was a speaker, and I built this whole school, and or was standing on some sort of mountaintop, you can't really change your entire life. So I took where I was and said, how do I find the parts that were good and whole and purpose filled? And how do I shed the bad, the shallow, the greedy, and purify my life without changing my location? And so the interesting part of that is I didn't start over. A lot of people throw everything out, that old saying of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I didn't. I said I could use my power. It would be like a great athlete who has the children of the world idolizing them, and he's sinful and sets bad examples. Well, what if a Dennis Rodman decided one day to be born again, and all the power that he had and prestige and influence and following, he turned into purpose-filled action? He'd still have the same audience, but he'd be operating from a different place. So Hardwired to Sin is a place to sit for the reader and ask themselves, how am I wired? Can my wiring be changed? Am I able to take where I am on this journey of life and move from the places where I do and say lies and commit sins and continue to walk my walk in a more meaningful, purpose-filled place? And I break down what I believe happens to us when we aren't living that wholesome life. I'm learning in the Bible that we are forgiven, obviously, if we drive from an innocent place. Man, just that revelation 2 days ago just let me off the hook from like 1,000 sins I've committed that I can now reflect upon, that I wasn't sitting here maliciously conspiring to hurt people, but rather innately attracted to doing things that were sinful. And that makes me feel better about leveling up.
I
I
want
didn't,
to
yeah,
interject on this for the audience. What a profound statement, because cults and businesses can operate like cults, will actually take that shame as a byproduct of fault and not let the person forgive themselves. And
right.
then they control them, whether on purpose or unintentionally in their own regard. Just that's a profound statement. Like
Yeah,
someone
it's,
listening to this, working for a company that's got them moving in a certain direction based on mistakes they've been unable to let go of or work through. Curious of your thoughts on that. Being
yeah,
all the
I think
difficult.
it's fear-based. I once had somebody say, why is this leader that is equal parts to you? And it wasn't my last employer, but the previous one to that. So we're going back now almost 20 years. I served for an organization for 12 years. And at some point in that 12 years, in the middle of the 12 years, I was one of 14 heads that were serving as a district manager, quote unquote. And so these 13 other men were serving as district managers. One of them was close to me in proximity, geographically speaking. All things considered, there were a lot of similarities, and we had very different results. And when we really examined it, his speech was fear-filled. The more you became servant to him, the tighter he turned the noose, and he really, that cult-like thing. And those people would turn, and I've seen it in our own industry with trade organizations. I've seen it with different companies where the leader is loud and they turn their shepherds or their apostles into people that are speaking their biblical word. We each have a biblical word about our lives. Culture Matters has a biblical word. 2020 Vision has a biblical word, meaning our culture represents X. Every Friday night, when the lights go out at 2020, I write a reflective email to my troops. And the reason that I do that is that I feel that I am the leader of my culture. And so last night I wrote a short but sweet message for this incredible, remarkable team. You know, the term, right, clutch player or money player. I've always felt I could play better under pressure, and God knows I don't love pressure in these years I'm now in. But when the environment dictates for us to rise, this team does it and shines. This first week of all new curriculum was exceptional. This week was truly brilliant. There are too many ways to say how or why. We are powerful. We are the force that will come to help others find their way in this dark market. This fall, we will go out and peddle our wares at many conventions and for premier clients. We will come back and launch the biggest single sales consulting menu of services we have launched since our opening. What's your 2020? We continue to take leaps forward in organization and process. We are great in position to begin to throttle the engine. We have 2020 vision for success. Walk away assured we are making an incredible difference. You matter. And so I want them to go away at the end of every week knowing as their leader years ago that they matter, that they're doing purpose-filled work, they're doing good work. Years ago, I would say, what are you going to do with your weekend? Who's working this weekend? Who can get 3 more sales? Who's going to, and the example I'm using in this statement is when we realize in our power to lead people that we're either going to lead them to a purpose-filled mission or we're going to lead them, you know, to pocketbooks and wallets. I believe people buy our product because we are purposeful. This is hard for me to say, but it's true. I'm not a person, I'm business savvy enough that I don't want you to bring me 20 stray cats. And I'll explain that. Please don't bring me. We have very little food at the table this year in our industry. We do not need to bring home stray cats. What does that mean? That's kind of hard to say out loud. It means we have to eat in this house. And if you bring in more mouths to feed, we split the differences more nil. That is not a survival. And survival, unfortunately, can be harsh. And I am capable of making harsh calls as a business leader. So I don't want to look soft when I'm saying this, because I am very strong in the mindset that there is sacrifice that's necessary for success. And there is hard decisions that need to be made. And there are things that don't look savory to people that are sitting around you that can look unempathetic, that are necessary. You have to decide if you can save the boat that you're in and the people that are in your boat right now. And if there's other people that swim up to your boat, surely if you can help them, pull them over. But if you pull people over and that sinks your boat, you now made bad decisions as a leader that killed everyone. So somewhere between people understanding that it's not about likability, it's about purpose, it's about strategy, it's about being smart, it's about driving from a good place, it's about making a difference on the turf you're standing. And it is about, did I start this year by cutting everybody's tuition without being asked? I did, tens of thousands of dollars, which I had advisors telling me not to do because nobody had asked me to do it yet. And I said, I'm going to hedge against my competitor making the same decision that you're advising me on and losing people without saying that they're going to quit because I didn't show a stay of faith in this market. And I believe because I did that, I saved tens of thousands of other dollars of quitters that would have left because they saw me make that sacrifice.
How? I'm going to read something from the chapter. For many years, I lived and thrived and shrunk and died, driven by my sins. I saw the same behaviors in other people. I saw men and women whose sinning behavior I disliked, and I would not say anything. I chose to live with the knowledge of their infidelity. Page 29. My question is, how does the reflection on statements like that, how does the reflections on a statement like that for the reader impact their business, their performance, their work life? What's the connection? what,
Can you repeat the quote one
yeah.
more time for me?
And this is a question around the
Sure,
general theme
sure.
of the chapter and the book, but I'm using this quote as a base, right?
Yeah.
To make this connection, if there is a connection in your mind. So the quote is, for many years, I lived and thrived and shrunk and died,
Yeah.
driven by my sins. I saw the same behaviors in other people. I saw men and women whose sinning behavior I disliked, and I would not say anything. I chose to live with the knowledge of their infidelity. So my question is, how does this message, how does this chapter impact business, business dealing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that in this moment we're in right now in 2023, if you do not have an unconditional love relationship, employer to employee, you will see betrayal. So the thing about my leadership that I felt was strong is during markets like this, I could get people to walk the plank with me. What that meant is if we had to abandon the boat to survive and walk into the deep ocean and swim for a new shore, I could get people to follow me into those troubled waters with the belief that if they swam behind me, I was leading them to their only salvation. In order for you to leave a scary place, you usually have to go to a scarier place before you get to a better place. And 2020 is in the same boat this year. You know, we've shrunk by 60%. I've salvaged as much staff as I possibly can. We've used the downtime to turn ourselves inside out, polish all the silverware and get ourselves ready for the next feast, if you will. Leading without fear, leading without resorting to theft of other things or malicious activity, and also keeping everybody warm, safe, and happy. There is some transparency where I'm like, look, we're probably going to have to leave the confines of this safe place and go out and do this, and that, but we're going to go do it together and we're going to be fine. We may have to shut the lights off in these other rooms and close the doors. We may have to lower the heat and get a little cold. We may have to, eat a little less. We might have to, stay a little longer. And when you're a leader that faces those things head on with confidence, and you've been here before and you portray that security, and you have worked beside the people digging your ditches with a shovel in your hand, people will go anywhere you want. The real test in my mind of both parenting, leadership, familial strength, relational strength is, I'll take Corey, for instance, because we know that my life partner works in the same field. He's having a hard year. I am making sure that I am way more available to him for conversation this year around his business because, I was his boss for 17 years in some way, shape, or form. I was his boss's boss, then I was his boss's boss's boss, and then I was his boss's 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 boss. And he's always looked to me for advice. And now I'm his long-term girlfriend, and I don't work with him directly anymore, but I work with this company that he still works for. And our dinner conversation's different. He doesn't really know. Maybe he's going to know after watching this episode, but I have very concerted asks of him for business consulting. I'm consulting him. He had something going on this week and he was feeling pretty down about it, and I could tell. And I knew it was really important that I give him some chess moves. And I knew he would listen to me. And yesterday, standing in the stairwell, I overheard him doing the things that I advised at a dinner that I invited him to go to the night before without prefacing that we were going into this dinner to talk about business. I got that conversation into the dinner mix. And so why am I saying this? Because he believes in me, he trusts me, he knows that I'm going to give him purpose-filled advice, life-saving advice. These are the moments where when you have the chess pin in your hand, your next play matters. Because one wrong move and you are checkmated and you go down. So to answer you, look around at the failure you're about to see and know that it's coming from leaders that did nothing but drive the bottom line. They didn't stop in the hallway to talk to Bob or Sue and ask them how they were. They didn't develop meaningful relationships that were purpose-filled. They drove from greedy places, self-serving places, and they will lose their wealth. Because I say in this book, I lost all my wealth twice in my life. Somewhere in this book, whether it's this chapter or later, I went from the millions I had down to zero. And I could spend another podcast telling you how that happened. And it's easy to just broad stroke with market and divorce. I'm going to say those two words. That bad markets happened to me that shrunk my wealth. I probably didn't previously save for the famine. I learned to do that, but then I lost money because of divorces. And without going down those rabbit holes, no matter whose fault the divorce was, it's a breaking of a vow and a commitment. And because of it, I'm not really surprised that in my mind, I was stripped of all my wealth twice. If we really believe that someone way back when wrote this Bible as a code of ethics with consequence and a natural scientific explanation of how we are wired to operate and what the consequences of failing to listen to that is, and we don't get into the too scientific realm of could this really be true that there's an afterlife and we're all going to heaven and all that stuff, but we more look at that as like an operating manual to the human body that centuries ago people understood the power of who we are and what we are on this planet without all the answers. It's still all these years later is true. And so I'm not writing my book to promote the Bible. I'm telling you, I discovered, because I understood the 10 Commandments through writing and living, that they are true. I mean, somewhere in this book, I talk about the reality. I say, in fact, I came to really scary realizations about sinners. I'm not afraid to say I have watched friends die from their sins and vices. Many. I watched a friend tell a lie about something and then get in a motorcycle accident and wrap himself around a tree. I watched a man attempting to cheat on his wife, and a few weeks later, he died while playing basketball. I watched a greedy man I worked with drop dead of a heart attack, a gluttonous woman die in her hotel room during a conference while eating herself. And I know we can sit here and argue, well, what about all the other people doing all these sins that aren't dying? Well, we don't know what their ultimate demise is going to be like. I mean, we have to be 100 years from now stop and look at all the sinners and say, where did they end? How did they end? Wow. So yeah, I helped my sister who was a sinner, and I'm a sinner, obviously, find her Hail Mary salvation. I don't mind saying. And I got to tell you, something beautiful happened to her. And I really need to say this. My sister, they say if God saves you, he's going to return you to your innocence in your final days. My sister had a lifelong friend of mine that she disliked, felt like the girl looked down on her since our childhood. This person happened to be a friend of mine that I was going to visit in the last 30 days, actually 7 days before my sister died to the day I was visiting with this woman. And not normally I wouldn't tell my sister because she would have negative things to say about it. But that particular day I told the truth. Again, having just, by the way, 4 days from finishing this book, because I finished 3 days before she died. And I told her I was visiting with this woman. And her response was, oh, that's so nice. Tell her I said hello. And in the final weeks of my sister dying, I saw her shed all of her hate and her anger, and she was living in some purified state. And I found in her phone after she died things that she wrote about asking God for ultimate forgiveness. And I saw her give forgiveness to other people. And so I witnessed with my own eyes an indescribable level of the day that she died, the morning she woke up. She wrote me the first sentence text was, "I feel great today."
Wow.
And it was the first time she had ever written that in years. She
Wow.
had never said she felt great. And I know that day she woke up and she went down and she sat and listened to a orchestra that was playing in the park. And she made no phone calls that day, no texts. Her final day was like this peaceful. Her house was clean. She walked out of this earth like the angels had come and just like ironed her sheets and like led her to this path. And there's a million things that went on between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. on the day that she died that would have had me at her house, my mom and dad. Her neighbors were walking by her door because there was a festival going on around the hospital, and they didn't knock on her door and open the door. And we've all asked ourselves, why not? Because maybe we would have found her laying there on the floor, but we knew God didn't want us to find her. He wanted to take her because it was time for her to stop suffering. And so all of this, to me, Hardwired to Sin and ending, to me, is where are we going in this life? How will we pass through to the other side? What will our lessons be? Will we make a difference on this earth while we're here? Will we find our way to salvation? I don't want to be in the last days of my life trying to get it. I want to help other people for the rest of my life discover what I found. I have to tell you, I'm not only born again, but I'm so committed to this ideology in my mind that finding honor changes how we all live amongst one another. This week, I recognized people bringing me stray cats and I rejected them. I need you to know I did hard things this week.
Wow.
I said no to people that wanted to bring other people to sit at my table and not buy my product, but just at a time when I can't volunteer to do things. Where I can, I do, and where I can't, or it hurts the people I'm helping that were already here on my mission. So I'm living in this place and I have no guilt about it, really, because I can give advice where to put that person that doesn't hurt the people that are going forward with me or my business. Does that make sense?
Uh, it's powerful.
Yeah. I'm grateful for the lessons that you helped me come to. I'm grateful that God put you on my path to raise the level of intellectual conversation that I had experienced to date in my life so that I could self-discover and look around the world and start to place puzzle pieces on my board. I think there's a lot of unknowingness going around, and I think you and I are the people in this world. And I'm saying this, that we're not greedy people and we want to help people, but we want to undiscover the truth. And we are curious people. And I still am. And I think we're on the right path, dude. Like I truly believe we are.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony because it it helps me, and I know I believe it helps the audience, but it's a profound. There's something deep. It comes right back around, and thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The whole book says this, right? If you look at the beginning, middle, and end of this book, we say and I know you always correct me how I use the word irony, but I'm going to use it right now and say, what an irony that my book opens up. This book is dedicated to God and Jay Doran. One sent the other to save me. I remember when those words came out of my head and then onto the paper, and I thought, whoa, like that's like right out of the gates when you open the book. It could have anybody's name there, but it packs a punch.
It's a double entendre in a sense because I'm not sure which is which because so the audience is clear. My walk is unclear. It's opaque. It's distorted. According to I'm surrounded by believers and unbelievers. And
what you just said?
It's not as if I personally have explicitly brought you into a faith that I've been serving of some nature. So I think that's helpful for the audience to know. So Christine's testimony, it's earth shattering to me. It's like it challenges my pride. There's an equality of in the sense that so because I mean, I don't know if I could say it any other way, but it's clear. Like, it's not like my hand was on the Bible bringing you to this or something. You're the one bringing me to this, saying
But
that.
there is two meanings there, and that's why I wrote it and sat with it. By the way, right now I'm writing my 6th book, and I have both the dedication and the tagline of the book written in about 40 variations, which is how I start every book. It takes me the whole walk and finishing the book typically to whittle it down. I begin to eliminate the ideologies of these statements until I reach the most profound one. And because I do believe when we start to read things, we have to really understand the beginning. I was not saying in that statement that God brought you to me, and I wasn't saying that you brought God to me. What I was saying is that mutually in this statement, my elevation of awareness came from the unity of Jay Doran and God in my life.
Wow.
And both, it makes if you read it, you're looking for the answer to that dedication. What is she saying here? And so, of course, I start to say, like, look, Jay showed up in my life and everything changed. But that is where I level up inside with my inner beliefs about my God. And I open the book with that. Like, we all have a God we're praying to. This isn't about religion. It's about an internal higher power and spirit. And where do you reach that level where that's unpacked and becomes...
I think for the utility of the audience that may never meet either of us, they have their own Jay and their own Christine in their life, the mentor-mentee dichotomy, which does not have to be hierarchical to spite both parties. There's a quality of growth. If anyone, if an advisor is brought in for a certain context of help, it doesn't mean that they can't learn from the student. And the student, there's a naturally occurring undermining impetus to separate, and meaning this conversation can be a foreshadow to everyone's culture, everyone's business. The employee and the employer, is anyone really better than the other? Well, not in a human sense. How we treat each other will matters, because if we treat each other like we're better than each other based on our position in the company, the employer is going to undermine the employee, or the authority is the manager is going to undermine the managed, right? So in a sense, it's like that's one of the messages that that I think you're conveying with Finding Honor, and I think I'm attempting to convey in the world through Culture Matters. And I think our working relationship is a metaphor for that, even though it's doing this show this way and how we're going about doing it.
In a way, we're exposing how we got to where we got. I mean, people may question, like, we talk about the steak dinners, How I Meet You, the book opens up and people will see, we weren't, we were just in this mutually curious place, but man, I was in a place of complete and utter destruction around me mentally, not physically. And I really needed saving at the time, but I could not have been more unaware. And that awareness would lead me to change, and the change would lead me to higher ground, and the higher ground would lead me to serving in a way I've never served. And today, I mean, that service led me to helping my sister die with honor. And that's how this book journeys to. It's powerful. And if any of those things didn't happen, I would be sitting here right now wondering if my sister had peace at the end of her life. And so even though grief is so powerful, and I still am challenged every day with missing her, I cry every day from her loss still. And it's been a year, dude. I welcome the day that I don't have the pain be at that level of depth. But I will tell you, where would I be if I didn't have peaceful resolutions that I could accept and share? We all are going to face these things in life. I'm going to face them again when I lose a parent. I'm going to face them again as I lose friends. And my ability to save myself and be strong, our ability as human beings to figure this out is the difference between whether we live in a life that we appreciate with great gratitude and enjoy, or a life where we continue to chase the shiny objects that are void of any level of purpose-filled ROI. And I know for a fact my cup runneth over. I'm going to leave it there.
I want to say that I think the value that you're bringing to companies, ultimately, if the people come from a place of more depth and treat each other with more dignity, they'll have more profit. They'll have more revenue. They'll have more, and then how they use it will change too.
Yeah.
So I think you're doing that for everyone that's listening, and every company that brings you in and your culture to help them. That's where the connection is, in my opinion. The connection is more success, but the responsibility to burden it for the long term. I think that's what you're doing. I guess we'll see you all in the next episode of the Culture Matters podcast.
Stay tuned. It gets even juicier as we go.